Miss me yet? The broadcast begins in 10 seconds. Now, of course, I don't necessarily mean that you miss me. I mean, after all, it's only been 3 weeks since we've sat here and taped a broadcast, but then I am one of the 91%ers, that is, that percentage of Americans that still have to get up and go to work every day. But the broadcast is here, brought to you by dailyborg.com, originating as always from deep behind enemy lines. It's conservative politics for the thoughtful. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. Now, Miss Me Yet is the slogan that appears on t-shirts and billboards, much like this one, usually attached to a likeness of former President George W. Bush. Why would anyone ask that question? Well, we'll discuss the reasons and answer the question when the broadcast continues in a moment.
Hi, I'm Leon the Lightning Lion, here to tell you, when thunder roars, go indoors. Thunder is loud, but lightning is dangerous and can hurt you even before it rains. When you hear thunder, go indoors quickly. Head for a house, school, or large building. If you're caught outdoors, get in a car, truck, or bus. Never go under a tree. Stay off telephones, computers, and video games. Remember, play it safe. When thunder roars, go indoors. Brought to you by these partners in lightning protection and lightning safety.
What if I didn't come from a famous family? What if I didn't have all their support? What if I didn't have all these opportunities? Believe me, it wouldn't be pretty. Pause before you play.
So, do I miss George W. Bush? Well, the answer is yes, terribly. Do I miss him because he's not Barack Obama? Well, today that's probably reason enough. But there has to be more than that. Certainly I miss him because his political philosophies are more in line with my own and more in line with the American people. I miss him because he was honest. When George W. Bush said he was going to do something, he did it. You didn't have to look around or watch your back, and you never felt surprised when something else happened because something else never did. He told us he was going to cut taxes, and he did. He told us the killers of 9/11 would be brought to justice, and they were. He told us that recession, which occurred after 9/11, would not stand, and it didn't. He told us as budget deficits reached record levels after that recession that he would slash that deficit in half within 5 years. Okay, well, that didn't happen. Instead, he cut it by 2/3 in 4 years before the housing market collapsed. When George Bush said something was going to happen, whether I liked it or not, it happened. He promised a prescription drug plan for seniors. He made it happen. He promised a drastic education reform. It happened. And on, and on, and on. In the end, enough achievements to fill 4 terms. I miss George W. Bush because he was a man who wasn't afraid to make hard decisions and wasn't necessarily locked into his ideology when he did so. He made the hard decision to invade Afghanistan and later to invade Iraq when every intelligence source on the planet told us that Saddam Hussein was an existential threat. He made the hard call to work with Senator Ted Kennedy on No Child Left Behind, something that horrified many Republicans. But it got the bill done. And then, with his political capital spent, the lamest of lame ducks, he made the hard calls about TARP. And that brings me to the next thing I miss. I miss a president who is a clear, decisive leader who can compel others to follow his vision. In September of 2008, the lamest of lame ducks, his approval ratings dragging in the low 30s, and Democrats actively plotting to ruin the economy to get Barack Obama elected if that's what it took. President Bush pulled together bipartisan majorities in both houses of Congress to pass the Troubled Asset Relief Program. Had that not happened, America's banking industry would have undergone a complete meltdown. Trillions in savings, the savings of a lifetime of hundreds of millions of Americans, would have simply vanished. Never mind housing. You would have had to get a mortgage to get a slot in a tent city. The Hoovervilles of the 1930s would have reappeared all across this country. President Bush stopped that from happening, despite the fact that he didn't have an ounce of leverage to work with. And history may well record the passage of TARP as one of the greatest acts of presidential leadership of all time. I miss George W. Bush because he was a humble man who knew where he came from, who he answered to. Suffice it to say, our current president has not a clue of this. Our current president has never met a hard call he could not abstain on. You never know where our current president stands. For example, month after month, speech after speech, we listen to Barack Obama tell us that the wealthy, or those who he perceives as wealthy, must pay their fair share. And yet, 34 months into his term, I am still waiting to find out exactly what that fair share is. President Bush had no trouble telling us that. Before he became president, the top half of wage earners in this country paid 87% of the taxes. He championed a piece of legislation that raised their stake to 91%, while removing tens of millions of lower income taxpayers from the tax rolls. Bush told you what he thought your fair share is. Good luck ever getting that piece of information from Barack Obama, or of getting this president to take a stand on anything. In his farewell address, George W. Bush said that he was a man who wasn't afraid to make the hard calls, whether you agreed with them or disagreed with them. The one thing no American could dispute was that he made them. Unafraid, unconcerned of political consequence, he made the hard calls. And for that, this nation should not only be grateful, but frankly, it's a quality for which we should deeply miss him. We'll be back with more in a moment.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
When you drive for a living, you buckle up every time, whether you drive one of these or one of these. Truckers know what I'm talking about, because no matter how good a driver you are, trouble can still happen. That's when you want to keep your safety belt on to keep you steady, behind the wheel, in control, and looking out for everybody. Safety is a professional driver's responsibility. Remember, you're the one who drives for a living.
A message from the U.S. Department of Transportation.
Heroes and Zeros time. It's something we haven't done in a little while. This week's hero is Newt Gingrich. Why, you say? Well, not because of any great political agreements or disagreements that I have with him, and I have my share of both, but because Newt Gingrich personifies something that we would like every child to know and understand. That you should never, ever quit. They told Gingrich when his campaign staff resigned that he was done. He should get out of the race. In fact, the media vipers circled for weeks, waiting for the announcement that Gingrich was calling it quits, that he couldn't go on without his departed staff, that it was a complete invalidation of his campaign. It is 7 months later. Newt Gingrich is now the Republican frontrunner, and he did it his way. You see, Gingrich's staff resigned because they wanted him out in Iowa shaking hands and raising money. Gingrich said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make this work through the debates. And that's how we're going to get our message out. He did it his way. And he was right. Today, he's the Republican frontrunner. In many polls, he's the frontrunner by a rather wide margin. And for that, for sticking to his convictions and never giving up, Newt Gingrich is this week's hero. This week's zero is New York Mets owner Fred Wilpon. It's not just that I'm ticked off at him because he let his franchise shortstop walk away without even giving him a contract offer, a player that the New York Mets have never seen before and will never see again. But how Mr. Wilpon got here. When the city of New York told him there would be no public funding to help either the Mets or the Yankees build a new stadium, Mr. Wilpon made a foolish business decision. In 2006, the New York Mets were the best team in the National League, having won 98 games. Injuries tripped them up in the playoffs, but with a few smart personnel decisions, the Mets were set to win for the better part of the rest of the decade. Mr. Wilpon instead made foolish business decisions, including leveraging himself to the tune of nearly $1 billion to build a regional sports network and to build Citi Field. The resulting avalanche of debt, which Mr. Wilpon is now struggling to pay and may never be able to pay, has forced the Mets into a position where they are now a non-competitive team that is financially hanging on for dear life. But they play in a beautiful new stadium. But answer me this. If you're a fan of this team, what would you rather have? A competitive, financially sound team playing Old Shea Stadium, or the beautiful new stadium with a team on the verge of bankruptcy that will have a hard time beating many AAA teams next year, never mind competing in the major leagues? That's an easy one. And that's why Mr. Wilpon is a zero. You have been assimilated.